Hello, my name's Braden. If you're watching this film, what I know is that you know that this is no ordinary time in the history of your nation, of my nation, of our world. And I want you to know it's not your imagination, because the best minds of our time are now telling us that we are living what is being called a time of extremes. It doesn't mean that bad things are happening in the world, or even good things for that matter, but it means big things are happening. Big changes in the world, and that means big changes in your life and big changes in my life. That's what I want to talk to you about today. When we talk about the kinds of changes that we're seeing our world go through, for many people, it seems like the world is simply falling apart at the seams for no apparent reason. But when we step back and look at the big picture, what we find is there is a rhythm, there are cycles that are driving the changes that we're seeing. They are rare cycles of long periods of time that we simply haven't seen in our lifetime. We're not used to these cycles. So I want to talk to you about those just a little bit and about what they mean in our lives. There are three cycles, natural rhythms that are converging right now that are bringing about tremendous change. They're causing the change that we're seeing in our world today. Some of the cycles you're familiar with, some you may not be. So I'm just going to identify them quickly here. The first is the cycle of climate. It is a fact that our climate is changing. I'm a geologist by degree, and I've studied this in my life. Climate change is a fact. It is not happening for the reasons that we're being told, however. For me, the important thing to acknowledge is that the climate is changing. And as we adjust our thinking and our living to reflect those changes, we have less suffering and less struggle in our lives. It's when we cling to an old way of thinking and an old idea, and we stubbornly choose to live the same way that we always have in the presence of a cycle that doesn't support it. That's where the struggle comes in. So the first cycle is a rhythm of climate change, and that would be enough to change the way we live our lives if it were alone, and it's not, because the second cycle is a cycle of economic change. We are living the last years of a 66-year-long economic cycle. It began in 1949. So unless you are thinking along those kinds of cycles, or if you remember when that last cycle happened, the economics of the world look very different. And when I talk about economies, it's not just about money. This is about people. It's about you and me. It's about the way we think, the way we share the vital resources of our lives: water, energy, medicine, communication, security, all of those kinds of things. Money may be a part of it, but it doesn't have to be. So I'm going to invite you to bear that in mind. The economics that are shifting, it's about people and the way we relate to one another, the way we share what's important in our lives. I was invited recently to speak at the United Nations in New York with my dear friend, my spiritual brother and colleague, Dr. Bruce Lipton. I'm a geologist, he's a biologist, and we were invited to come and speak about the changes I'm talking to you about right now from our unique perspectives. And the third cycle that I'm going to talk to you about surprised the people at the UN. They were not used to hearing about this cycle. It's a cycle of human conflict. And when you say human conflict, some people say, what do you mean? A cycle of conflict? Doesn't it just happen randomly whenever it happens? And the answer is no. Human conflict follows very specific rhythms and cycles that are largely based in our relationship to the earth, the magnetic fields of our planet, and our sun. And just briefly, the cycle looks like this. When the magnetic fields of our planet are weak, when they are at their lowest points, we as humans in society and individuals, as in our families, we become less cooperative and more aggressive in the presence of weak magnetic fields. When the magnetic fields are strong, we become much more cooperative, much less aggressive, and willing to work together and share ideas. So I shared this information with the United Nations, and they said, how come we don't know about this? And that's the reason I want to share this with you. It's not something in the West that we typically acknowledge. Western science tends not to look at large expanses of time and large natural rhythms and cycles. When we look at these three rhythms coming together, any one of them would be enough to change the way we think and live our lives. The fact that all three are converging right now in this lifetime in a way that we have not seen in 5,000 years of recorded human history. We have no guidebook, we have no manual that tells us how to navigate through the uncharted waters of this cycle. And this is why it's so important for us to embrace so many of the new discoveries and the new ideas that change the way we think about ourselves and one another. Because it is those discoveries, the spiritual discoveries, the discoveries of our relationship between our heart and our brain and intuition, our ability to self-heal, to self-regulate our emotions. Those are the kinds of abilities that help us to navigate through the rhythms and cycles and what many people see as the chaos of a changing world. And that's why this bookstore is so amazing. And that's why there are so many people with so many different ideas. Everyone thinks differently. Different ideas about what this change means in our lives, about spirituality. Everyone learns differently. So I'm inviting you, as you embrace the new ideas, find the ones that resonate with you. What does it mean to be a compassionate being? What does it mean to feel the deep connection with not only yourself, but with other people and with the natural world? What is your relationship with your own body? And have you acknowledged the language that your body uses to communicate with you when it asks for a healing, or if you've already had a healing, maybe it's asking for a greater healing? What are your relationships telling you? Because every relationship in your life is a mirror that is telling you something about the way you think and what you truly believe, even in your subconscious mind. You may not be consciously aware of what your beliefs are, but every relationship will reflect back to you some facet of your deepest belief. And the more intimate the relationship, the closer the people are to you that know you the best and know where all the buttons are to push that really light up the issues for you, those are the mirrors that you want to look at the closest, because the mirrors don't lie. They will tell you the deepest secrets of your truest beliefs if you have the wisdom to recognize those things. So there are new discoveries that are helping us to change the way we think about ourselves in the world. The old ways of thinking, I'm not going to say they were wrong. I'm going to say they worked well enough to get us to the world where we are right now. We're here, so we have to say that they worked. But the world changed, so our thinking must change. And new discoveries are giving us the reasons to do that. One of the most powerful of the new discoveries is the discovery in 1991, it was made, 1994, it was published, of about 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart. I'm just going to be personal, in your heart. 40,000 specialized cells that had not been recognized in the past. They're called sensory neurites, and they are essentially brain-like cells, but they're not in the cranial brain, they're in the heart. So brain-like cells in the heart that think and feel and remember independently of the cells in our brains, of the neurons in our brains. And it is these sensory neurites and our ability to communicate with them and access them that allows us extraordinary opportunities and the realization of extraordinary human capacities. Deep intuition on demand, self-healing on demand, the triggering of anti-aging enzymes on demand, resilience to change on demand, and much, much more. Access to the subconscious on demand without going through hypnosis. And many more things. It is the discovery of these sensory neurites and our ability to tap their power that is opening the door to a new way of thinking, a new way of living. And what's interesting, for me especially interesting, is that the new discoveries, in many instances, they parallel our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions. I've spent the bulk of my adult life exploring some of the most magnificent and remote and isolated and pristine and beautiful places remaining in the world today, because I believe that's where the ancient wisdom is most intact. And as I've spent time and come to understand these indigenous principles and spent time with the shamans and the monks and the nuns and the abbots and the curanderos and the healers, what I found, as different as they are from one another, there's a common theme that runs through all of their traditions that empowered the people of our past. And that theme is our ability to tap, to harmonize our heart and our brain together. Two separate organs, but the ability to harmonize them into a single potent system that is called heart hart-brain-coherence. This is the new scientific term. And it's in the presence of hart-brain-coherence that we open the door to these extraordinary capabilities that I've just listed. And it is those capabilities that give us the power to become resilient in a world of change in our time of extremes. This is the theme of my most recent books. Every book I've written is about some facet of your experience, of your relationship to the earth, to the past, to the future, to your own body, to your beliefs. The new book, Resilience from the Heart, identifies the science and actually teaches the techniques that allow us to harmonize the heart and the brain so that we can be resilient in this time of tremendous change. It's all part of a natural rhythm. I mean, we certainly are contributing to it. But even if we were doing nothing in our world, we would still be experiencing these natural rhythms. And I'm an optimist by nature, and I'm also a realist. I'm optimistic about our future. I've never been more optimistic about the world. The reason is this: now we know what works and what doesn't work, and we can stop doing the things that don't work, and we can do a lot of the things that do. The realist in me says that's true, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to change the way we think about ourselves and the world. There was an author in the 20th century, his name is Khalil Gibran, and I think his books are probably even in this bookstore. He wrote a book entitled The Prophet. And in the book The Prophet, he had one chapter about work. The work it takes for us to make that change. He said, work is our love made visible. And I believe that. I read that book when I was 10 years old, and it has been a cornerstone of my life. Work is our love made visible. And everything that I do, the work, the energy I put into it, is a visible expression of my love. And I'm saying this because the work it takes to change our lives, I think we are worth it. I think this world is worth it. So I'm going to invite you to explore in whatever way you can, what does it mean to you to find out what your love made visible is all about? What is the work that you're putting into your life and your world? What does it mean to you? How are you sharing your love made visible?